Hello and welcome to the Bipolar Game Changer 30-Day Challenge. Today I'm starting a 30-day challenge that I have been pondering for a few weeks. And you may be familiar with 30-day challenges where just one thing is taken on as a goal for 30 days. Getting stronger in some way or lots of different possibilities. But for my 30-day challenge, one of the challenges is to figure out a complete lifestyle change. So some of these challenges might change throughout my 30-day challenge, and also whether or not I will stick to documenting the challenge by video for 30 days is another question, and whether I will continue the whole challenge for 30 days is another thing too. And why am I so wishy-washy about this? Well, I was diagnosed with bipolar disorder 1 with psychotic features in 2011. That was 14 years ago now, and at this point in my journey, I feel like I've learned a lot. I still have a lot to learn. I'm always learning, and learning is my favorite thing to do. The thing is, at this point, I feel like I also have a lot to share, and even, dare I say, teach. And the word teach brings out a lot of imposter syndrome, for sure. Because I've had imposter syndrome this whole time with sharing different things that I've learned. I did manage to write a book and self-publish it in 2021. That took a lot of learning as well. But I never really went into marketing it or anything like that. At the same time, people have found it and given me feedback that some of it is helpful. And that being said, writing a book is one thing that I wanted to do, and I managed to publish it before ChatGPT was invented. And that brings me to one of the reasons for this challenge. It is August 10th, 2025, and there's more and more AI in the world. And at the same time, for me at least, there's this pull to utilize some of it to amplify and augment the work that I've been doing, which I'm glad that I had the opportunity to do that work without AI to really exercise my brain. But now I've created so much with that I do wonder which direction to go with it for using AI. There's many, many, many possibilities, right? They'll just become more and more unlimited. So taking time to really sit and reflect and decide what it is that I or you or anyone wants to do with their time and energy and lifestyle design in the age of AI is important. And in my life, I've been pretty busy this last year. And I have about a month now where I'm not as busy, so I have time to think about lifestyle design and getting that in alignment with how I want to move forward with my life. So we are at a crossroads between, say, for example, in my case, sitting on the computer all day and working on the computer on AI, or getting outside. So why now? It's about a month left of summer where I live, and that means sunshine and birds and other little animals and being able to go for walks. And after that, it's going to be rainy and cold. So part of my lifestyle design challenge, or just this 30-day challenge in general, is to make a practice of going outside, especially in the morning, because I watched a YouTube video about the importance of morning sunlight on the eyes and the whole biorhythm and even neurotransmitters that are made. So this is light on your eyes, on one's eyes, without sunglasses on. And that's another reason why I'm protecting my eyes from blue light, is blue light's not good for your eyes. And I won't go into the details, but just giving a little bit of reasoning behind some of the challenges. Like end of summer, last month of summer, doing a 30-day challenge, getting out in the morning when there's sunlight, when there actually is sunlight. And I came up with this today where I decided I'm going to work on my projects and everything that I'm working on, which is a big list, from noon to 7. Now, noon to 7, not every day, maybe 5 days a week. But the reasoning is sometimes I can have a tendency to just work all day long and then eventually get outside maybe. And the thing is that in the afternoon or the end of the day, it's really busy outside, like traffic and people and just everything going on. So morning time is quieter. So it's a great time to get out, get the daylight in, and go for a walk, which is another part of the challenge, is to walk a good 10,000 steps a day. Has many, many, many neuroprotective effects. And the other thing too is I've noticed as I get older, the heat is more unbearable. It's bearable, but it's not like before. When I was younger, I could just lay in the sun all day, no problem. And now it feels hot. It's not too hot, but I'm just saying, be out in the morning, it's a bit cooler, and hopefully possibly go out in the evening again during this 30-day challenge. But I'm not really going to hold myself to any of it too strictly. That's not the point. The point is to lean into these things. And another reason I'm doing this 30-day challenge is that I started to create an idea last year. And my plan was to test it out last year in maybe a 30-day challenge. But what happened was that I did a different challenge and I ended up in a depression for 3 months. And that was from mid-August. So I think it was about August 15th that started. So almost a year ago now. Can't believe a year has gone by. And then I was in a depression where I couldn't really do much of anything for 3 months. And without going into the details, I will share one detail. The challenge I was trying to do was medication reduction. I've done this a couple times throughout my 14-year journey, and personally, that has not worked for me. I'm on the same meds that I was in the very beginning, and that's not a goal for me, and it's not going to be a goal for me in this challenge, and at least for another 5 years, at least, that I can imagine. And maybe never. And so what I'm saying is, if you're watching this, don't go off your meds. If you want to, there are probably people that have that information. There are. I know of that information. And some people really like to make that a goal, right? But I did that as a challenge last year. And what ended up happening was that I ended up in a 3-month depression. So instead of being able to do all these other challenges that hopefully I'm going to get to do this year, I just got to lay around and watch YouTube for a really long time. And it wasn't fun. So anyways, what I'm saying is that hasn't worked for me. That's not going to be part of my journey. I'm not encouraging it. I just talked with someone the other day on a Zoom call who tried as well and had regrets. It works for some people, but it's the world's not really designed for that, to be able to be highly sensitive and be in the world. So for me, this turns down the volume on the sensitivities. And this is important for my challenge because with the volume turned down on my sensitivities, I can then go out and about and start to do this next part of my challenge, which is what I called it's basically reality testing. And so last year I was working on a lot of things on my computer and not getting outside. And my goal was to get outside and do some reality testing. But the thing that happened was, I ended up in depression, as I said. And this is another reason why I'm doing this 30-day challenge. And you'll notice that I'm going to weave these things in, like, why am I doing this? Like, my background, what I've learned so far, it just gets woven in. I'm not going to be doing this like topic based where I'm doing a highly curated or edited or with a bunch of frills and gimmicks, because I think, and I tend to go on tangents, but I think that way is going to go by the wayside, because anybody will be able to do that by clicking a button on AI. It'll have them, it'll say, do this, do these topics, blah, blah. So going into our beingness and who we really innately and naturally are in a fluid and dynamic way is essential. And that's part of this challenge too, right? It's an embodiment challenge where in the age of AI, we could have a tendency to sit there and be on the AI. And if you think about it, this presents a challenge for people in the future who want to say, we'll just call it attract an audience, right? Have people listen to them. Now imagine if we're each doing projects or talking with the AI all day long. Each person is listening to their own AI input and accounts talking with them. So there'll be some people who want to talk to humans. And so by being able to speak as a human in human ways without editing and what have you, then that's really going to be important, right? It's important to develop this. And that's part of the reason why I'm attempting in this challenge to overcome my imposter syndrome. Because while I've been fortunate enough to never self-stigmatize, there are people who get labeled with mental illnesses who stigmatize. Some people don't. And I happen to be a person who doesn't self-stigmatize. At the same time, this imposter syndrome, this fear or reluctance to share one's truth as a person labeled with a mental illness is there because of how, well, easily said, we try to share in our experiences. Sometimes that's part of it, right? Like when I was in my first mania, I had insights or I had observations or visions, and if I was out and about, I might try to share that with somebody else, and it might meet a blank stare or it might get reflected back nicely, and that gives me a bit of a charge in the moment. But it's not really how society's designed, so overall that energy gets lost, basically, like flushed down the toilet. And that's also why, as I'm sitting here talking about doing this 30-day challenge, it's important for me to say that I have done a ton of, I'll just call it integration work for the last 10 years. And from that vantage point, I'm speaking to say, I feel like I have a lot to share and some things to I'll just say teach reluctantly. But I want to learn to overcome my reluctance to sharing. And so this challenge is also me realizing, okay, I have something to share. I'm confident that I have something to share, but I'm not confident in my ability to deliver that or to share that, to teach that, right? And I know that. So part of this challenge is trying to go about that and maybe teach what I call Re-Uncovery. So I'm going to do the lifestyle design thing daily and talk about what I did and what I'm designing and the reality testing I'm doing. And my intention is to start off with that bit and then also spend some time each day just teaching Re-Uncovery to embody it. And I have taught it in a sense that I wrote a book about it. And I didn't fully write the book about Re-Uncovery. I wrote The Bipolar Game Changer. If you want lots of background and context and things that I've learned, it's on my Substack, Bipolar Game Changer. And I've done some other things too. They're all in kind of draft form, right? And rather than going back and be like, okay, I'm going to perfectly craft a new book. I'm going to perfectly craft a new course on Re-Uncovery. I'm going to perfectly craft a lovely Substack. I'm going to perfectly craft whatever. I'm going to go into the embodiment because this is the next part of what I call Re-Uncovery. And what is Re-Uncovery? Well, I define it presently as reverse engineering self-actualization from bipolar, mania, madness. And the reason why it's reverse engineering is because if you've had an experience like I have, my first mania was very expansive and very visionary and very meaningful and spiritual and many, many, many things, very dynamic. And it's different for everyone, right? Some of the themes are the same. The experiences are generally different and unique. So what I'm trying to share is one of my senses is that we're all unique, of course. And then some of us have similar experiences. Like I could say my mania has largely been positive, and even the parts that were negative, I learned from and I've made into positives. Now, there's some people that might say mania is the worst thing ever, don't like it, right? Now, if a person thinks in terms of, say, madness or psychosis, they might think everything's bad. I sense for myself and my experience that everything I can learn from. I can learn from everything. So if I put it in those terms, my very first experience had too much to learn from while I was in that time of experiencing it. So that means I need to go back intentionally and look at the things that I uncovered and re-uncover them. So they got uncovered in an extraordinary state or crisis or non-ordinary state. And then after, when the crisis is over and I feel a little bit better, then I can look at what I discovered, what I wrote down, what I observed, the meanings that I harvested. And by doing that, I encode them in a different way. And I've come to see the energetic openings as more or less sacred states of receiving information. And because of that, I don't go out and about when I'm in a heightened state if I have a lot of information channeling through. So this is where it's important to say that I've learned a lot from a lot of different people out there who also have some kind of diagnosis of maybe bipolar or some kind of madness. And there's been so many people doing amazing work over the last number of years. And we need more and more of that. So that's one of the reasons why I'm attempting to get over my imposter syndrome, because we need many, many people like us sharing what we've learned in our own unique way outside the medical model, right? We all know about the medical model. We've experienced it, maybe are still experiencing it. But in my experience, I don't need to keep saying that, right? Because I'm speaking about my experience, but we're trained to say this, right? We're trained to say, in my experience. We're not trained to say, we or, and there's good and not so good points about that, right? So what I'm saying is, with what I've created, it's a certain piece of the puzzle, and it could be like a 10,000 piece puzzle, right? Or more. And there's other pieces of the puzzle. So if there's things that I say that don't resonate, I would say maybe give me a chance. And if I still don't resonate with you and your experience, like if we're not a we, just because we maybe both have bipolar 1 with psychotic features, we might not be of the same type of learning or meaning making or the way we see the world. And that's not wrong. We need lots of different ways of seeing the world. But I'm wondering who sees the world kind of like I do. So that's why I'm sharing some of the ways I see the world. I see them as the invisible scaffolding, right? Like we talk about, or at least now we're encouraged to talk about, I feel like this, or I feel this way, or my emotions. But what about the motions of our mind that create the perspectives that we see that are invisible? So making some of that more languageable, right? For example, I have aphantasia. That means I don't see images in my mind. I don't have an imagination. So if you want me to talk about nonfiction, I'm not interested, because if I read some fantasy, I can't see anything in my mind. So it's just words. And that's not to say that I don't have visions of possibilities, but that's a little bit different, right? So just because we have the same diagnosis doesn't mean that I'm the person to share something that will be valuable in your journey. There's a lot of other people out there, and I know of quite a few. So if you need a resource of a certain type of way you see the world, or what you're interested in, or what you feel your sense of vision or mission is, then let me know. But I feel there's a lot of different types that aren't expressed. So some of the types that are expressed are say spiritual, right? If you have a bipolar label and you feel like you're spiritual, that has quite a bit of information out there. It's not very well known, but I've read some of it and I connect with it a lot. But there's more that I see than that. And there's probably a lot more in that I don't see, but I am more interested in this over here, right? Like, just because we have bipolar doesn't mean we have to be interested in spirituality, or we have to be interested in coming off meds, or we have to be interested in whatever. Because a lot of these things, it's like, well, I might want to lean into spirituality because that affirms that there's more to me than mental illness, right? Or I might want to go off meds because that affirms to me that there's more to me than a patient being on medication, right? But there's still so much more that isn't about resisting mental illness or insisting on it either, right? And we're going to go into those things. And I'm not saying those things aren't important. It's just those are not what my interests are. And that's part of what Re-Uncovery is. At the same time, Re-Uncovery is about a process for people to be able to sense what is interesting for them. That's the whole point. So even if you're not interested in my interests, you still might benefit from Re-Uncovery. So I may as well talk a little bit about Re-Uncovery now. So Re-Uncovery, as I've created it, and just so you know quickly, I wrote the book, The Bipolar Game Changer, and then I was accepted to create a presentation for ISPS, which is International Society for Psychological Approaches to Psychosis. And it's a great organization, and they have great conferences and much, much more. Lots of education. So I've learned a lot from all of that. And I still see that what I'm doing is another piece of the puzzle. We need more of those added in all the time. And that's part of what Re-Uncovery is figuring out what your piece of the puzzle is. Because that connects with, many of us have a sense of mission when we first go into mania. And there's a lot of truth to that. But the point of Re-Uncovery is to reverse engineer that. So if I am in my first mania and I sense my mission and I try to carry it out in that first mania, like 99.99999% chance it's not going to work. But if from that mania and subsequent ones, I write down what I'm sensing that I want to do, and then look at it when that state is over and then make more sense of it, and then start to do stepwise things in daily life type energy that move towards that, then maybe in 20 years I will have carried out some aspect of that mission or some other mission that comes to mind later on. But the state of mania itself is not meant for trying to carry out the mission. So the point of Re-Uncovery, one of the points, is to decouple the ideas and the insights and the information from the action, because it's too energetic to try to do. Like, it's the envisioning state, it's the downloading state, it's the blueprint state. It's meant to be sacred, right? We sense that we feel a lot of spirituality, or we connect with spirituality in so-called mania, and we try to do all these spiritual things. But the thing is that it's, as I've moved towards, is creating that energy as a sacred container. So rather than feeling spiritual and going out and do spiritual things, I feel spiritual and I stay home and I go to work, and I go see my family, but I stay home and contain that energy for blueprinting, ideas, prototyping, inventing, seeding so many different things that may come into fruition later as I am able to use some of those ideas in daily life. Now, that's generally not how it goes for people. And I'm not saying it's the only way. It's generally not the way it happens now, but it is a way that I have had success with. And there are other people that have had success doing other things and as ways to integrate some of their experiences. And if you're curious about that, let me know. I know of at least, one other person and several others who are doing amazing things. Like they have courses, there's lots of great information out there and learning and training by people with lived experience and lived expertise. And so this is a lived experience experiment and hopefully turning it into expertise. So we were talking about Re-Uncovery, and I was creating a presentation, and that's when I started to unfold the structure behind what I had been doing for nearly 10 years, but it was an informal process. And that way I formalized it into a scaffolding, a structure, a process. So far it seems to hold together quite well. And Re-Uncovery it's made up of 5 stages, stages A through E. And these are stages of development. And again, it's based on reverse engineering from extraordinary states into embodiment, into life. And even though I've outlined stages A to E, and I've touched into all the stages because bipolar is iterative and it's an energy cycle. I call it a biorhythm. And I've tracked my biorhythm and I have it down quite precisely, but I would assume that other people have different biorhythms, and it's about finding out what yours is. And finding your biorhythm isn't even essential for Re-Uncovery, because you can know when you're in an extraordinary state and make it a sacred process and harvest it and go through Re-Uncovery that way. So even though I've been in all these stages at different times for different lengths of time and different intensities, overall, I'm at stage C. So this 30-day challenge is about stage C. I will outline the stages. Stage A is called draft, and the theme is harvest. So this relates to extraordinary states. It's really a draft state. And in the beginning, I did go out and about and try to do things in this state. But at the same time, I did write a lot of things down. And I still have all that writing. And that, in a way, is a harvest. So it consists of documenting things down and moving towards documenting things down more than trying to do everything. Because in an ideation state where there's lots of ideas and lots of insights, it's impossible to do them all. But there is an attempt to try to do a lot of them. And by doing so many, it ends up just making the energy into a lot of chaos. And so by documenting them down, that means we can look at them later. We can read them, we can write about what we read, we can talk about what we read to ourselves, and now even with AI, if that's something that you want to do. And from that, we can start to see that there's different categories of ideas. So chapter 1 of Re-Uncovery stage A is harvest, and chapter 1 is documenting things down with the intention to expand upon them later or extrapolate them, or maybe even not, maybe just read them, maybe just keep them aside forever. The whole point was to receive those things, those insights, and not do all of them. One can go through after and harvest some of them that maybe that we do want to do from those ideas. So it does take a bit of practice and of learning to learn not to try to do so many of those ideas while the energy is really flowing. It's kind of like kids. If you left a kid alone in a candy store, they would probably just eat all the candy till they're sick. I remember one time, I can't remember what grade I was in, but it was the end of the year when there was a party. There was so much junk and food and everything. I ate so much that I threw up. Like, I stuffed myself and made myself sick, right? So it's kind of like that in a way. There's so much ideas flowing and we want to act them, which is the eating of the candy, right? So we have to put the candy aside for later, right? Because we can't eat all of it now. There's so much candy. It's like mania is raining candy. So then chapter 2 is harvest template, which means that there are certain categories of these ideas. So imagine I'm trying to do what's happening in the flow of ideas and have one idea about this invention, and then I have an idea about the mission I'm on, and then I have an idea about helping a friend, and then I have an idea about something to write. And they go like that, and I'm being pulled in all these different directions. Now, if I write them down, right, in an iteration of an extraordinary state, and then I go back and look at it once the state has de-energized, then I might see, oh, look, here's the ideas about helping the friend. Here's the ideas about this mission I feel like I'm on. Here's the ideas about this invention and that invention. And here's the idea about whatever else. Now I can put them and sort them into categories, right? And then now I have all of the ideas with more of them interrelated. And so instead of being pulled in this direction and that direction and that direction, I can, with the energy that I'm starting to get back after resting, start to carry out some steps in daily life. Because the point is to be able to do some of these things that are coming to us, all these ideas, right? Some people would love to have that many ideas, but having that many ideas when we haven't learned to decouple the doing from the action of the ideas, instead of doing the idea, like try to carry out the mission, write the idea down. Now the doing becomes writing it down. A lot of us already do this, right? I'm not trying to say we don't. I'm sharing this as how it seemed to appear into a structure of reverse engineering self-actualization from extraordinary experiences, right? So if I try to do everything in the extraordinary state, and I get pulled in all different directions, and then at the end it doesn't all, or much of it gets done, like not much of it at all, then what I'm doing is associating all these ideas with getting pulled everywhere, and then it's chaos and not really doing anything. Whereas this other way is a way to harvest it, practice it. So once I have those harvest categories, now I can start to practice doing some of these things with all of the ideas or the insights in the right categories, right? Because having ideas is not a bad thing. Lots of people would love to have lots of ideas, but it seems that having lots of ideas sometimes is connected with trying to do all of them. And additionally, some ideas we might not want to do, but we might want to outsource someone to do, or hire someone to do, or give the idea to someone else, or just drop it, or have that in a file for later, right? And the thing is, now with AI, this might make Re-Uncovery a lot easier, is, you just keep track of everything, you have it all written down, then you just put it in the AI and it'll put it into categories for you, right? So what I've created, I haven't even integrated yet into AI, and it could really make our states and our ways of being and our gifts and our capacities extremely valuable to ourselves and to other people too. And many of us have said, We have gifts, we have value to humanity, we have something to contribute. And with the way things are now with technology, there could be ways that that gets scaled quite quickly. So it's really an exciting time. And that's why it's also important to really lean into the gifts and the gold of it, right? But not in an excited, extraordinary state energy type of way, because that gets carried away, right? It's about it being in your body, being embodied in yourself. And we're going to get to that. So, chapter 3 is what I call the 6 dimensions and 9 lattices. Now, this means that now you have your harvest template with different categories. And I have a webinar about that more specifically, about the very specifics of this. We're just talking in general. So, the 6 dimensions and 9 lattices is just six categories with 9 subcategories, or you could do it the other way, 9 categories with 6 subcategories. And these are meant to be things that you are interested in and learning. So whereas the harvest template categorizes the ideas and the things that came through in the extraordinary state, 6 dimensions and 9 lattices starts to track what you're really interested in, which could be something that is beyond, like you want to learn about it, or you're learning about it, or it's kind of the themes, right? So some of my 6 dimensions are language, because I'm really interested in a lot of different aspects of language, like semantics, semiotics. I don't have them in front of me. And then that ties to a lot of the linguistic features of so-called bipolar disorder, right? But I'm interested in language in the strengths of it. The neologisms are strengths, and that can feed into creating, say, slam poetry or a new lexicon, or, it sounds manic to say, I want to write a lexicon of words that I've made up. But for me at this moment now, that is very embodied. It's not manic. It's actually me. And that's the point, is to make some of the stuff, the potential and the possibilities into who we are. Because it's coming up in our awareness for some reason, to learn from it, to learn to negate certain aspects of things. It's not all about just piling it on. And, even learning to avoid doing some of the things that we tend to do in mania, we can learn, right? It's very much a childlike state, because we have access to so much of our potential that we don't know the rules of. We don't know so much of the nuance of it. So that's part of what this is, right? It's like, imagine getting access to a whole nother part of reality all of a sudden as an adult. In my case, I was an adult when I had my first crisis. In a sense, in that domain of that unknown, I'm in kindergarten, right? So I'm learning. And I don't necessarily have a teacher. The extraordinary state itself is my teacher, and it's up to me to learn, right? If I keep bumping up against the same theme that is blocking me, then what is that about? And to go with that, for me lately, I've been seeing a lot of 11:11. And you could say, oh my gosh, 11:11, and I'm a bipolar person. That's scary. That sounds manic, right? But why am I not allowed to think about 11:11? I'm just saying in general. As soon as we start thinking about these other things that we maybe explored in a mania or had access to an extraordinary state, it's a sign that we're going back to mania, right? But as we learn more and more and more and go into it more and more and more, especially when we're in a regular energy, we don't just relegate this dimension to when we're in that dimensional energy. When we bring it into our daily life, then we start to build that into our embodiment, which isn't just about cells and muscles, right? It's about that which is animating us as well. The memetic field, or the field of meaning that is animating us. So the 6 dimensions and 9 lattices, they can really be anything. So they're not the 6 dimensions and 9 lattices as I wrote them out for myself. Other people might have other dimensions and lattices. But the thing is that it might also give us an idea of of how to relate with other people with extraordinary energy, where it's like, I'm interested in quantum physics. I'm interested in 1111, as I was talking about it, seeing a lot of that lately, which is a call to